Hello, you welcome to The Insight. In this edition of the program, we are talking about women and girls. They are the most vulnerable who suffer all forms of sexual and gender-based violence in conflict, post-conflict, and even in normal situations. Over the years, gender-based violence has been increasing in many African countries, despite the implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence and the United Nations Security Council Resolutions 1325 and 1820 adopted to combat these inhumane acts against women and girls. In particular, the ills have continued persisting in many African countries, especially the countries where there are conflicts. And we're going to be looking at these issues in this edition of the program. Stay with us. I'll meet our guest in some few seconds. Joining me on the program today are two great African women fighting for the women, fighting for the girls, fighting for the rights of human beings in general. To my right, Joana Amar Osei Tutu is the head of the Women, Peace and Security Institute of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. She has several years of experience in capacity building, project management, advocacy, networking, and with special focus on women. She is specialized in peace and security, gender mainstreaming, transnational organized crimes, natural resources governance, and good governance. Joana Amar Osei Tutu, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, and to my left, Sylvie Jacqueline Ndongmo is a peace and security leader with more than 20 years of experience. She is the current Africa regional representative of Women International League for Peace and Freedom and the president of the Cameroon section. She is also a member of the African Union Steering Committee for the Fund for African Women, and Sylvie has been very instrumental in advocating for peace in the Republic of Cameroon and in Central Africa by leading the advocacy process for 1325 National Action Plan that is at the level of Cameroon, and greatly contributing to the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 Central Africa Regional Action Plan. Sylvie Jacqueline Ndongmo, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Right, and we are starting this edition of the program with a report on one of the worst cases of gender-based violence recorded in Cameroon in the past days. It is in this report compiled by Mala Glory.
Physically tortured and emotionally fragilized. Mbezele Germaine Karin, mother of one, has experienced domestic violence for over 10 years. From 44-year Amang Akodio Diodene, alias Masandie, whom she thought would make a good husband. Persisting in an unhealthy relationship just to keep the man and have a better shelter for herself and son, Germaine ended up in the hospital. Her condition forces her back to her family home at Ngonsua neighborhood of the Douala 2 municipality. He used a colasse here and there. He also used his shoes to beat me on my face. Then I collapsed due to the severe beatings. I am feeling pains here on my back. Now my ribs are broken. Germaine's son almost lost his life after seeing his mother's condition. Friday, I experienced a shock through which I almost lost my life. My mother was not home. She came in on Saturday and spent the day with me and left in the evening for a wedding. Around 2 a.m., she came in this condition, all beaten with wounds all over her body. There is little or no consideration from Akojo Diedone towards his to-be in-laws as he exercised ugly behavior even in their midst. He said he did not beat his wife, whereas she confessed to us that the man used a machete on her. He then broke a bottle and wanted to stab my husband when he escaped. Bezele Germain spends all her night on this armchair, crying for help as her family struggles to contribute money for her treatment. Meanwhile, investigations are ongoing to get Masandie, who is on the run.
That is what you both have been fighting against for several years today. And when you see this, Sylvie, Jacqueline, Ndongmo, what's your reaction about the situation of women and young girls in the face of this kind of cruelty?
Jonathan, is so sad when I watch this type of documentary, because there is nothing, absolutely nothing which can justify this. I heard the child saying that he doesn't know why, what the mother and the father were talking about before reaching to. There is no reason. No matter what they were talking about, nothing can justify this. And that is exactly why we have been here fighting for so many years. Because unfortunately, in spite of all the work that people have been doing, not only civil society organizations, state at different levels, the rate of this type of violence is still increasing on the continent. So it is a problem and it needs to be addressed. That's the reason why we are here. We are here for 5 days trying to see how we can properly address it in a concerted way.
Joana, Amar, Osei, Tutu, have you seen this kind of thing in Ghana before?
I don't think this kind of thing is new in any country. It's not a Ghana problem, it's not a Cameroon problem. It's a world problem. It happens everywhere. It's not the first woman to be beaten by, it's not the first person to be beaten by a spouse in any country. I think it happens in every country. And I think the problem that makes it exist is that the society doesn't put in place mechanisms for preventing it from happening. Listening to the documentary, the report, I think I heard a commentary that said that this has been going on for 14 years. If I heard 10 years, if I heard correctly. So for 10 years, this relationship has been volatile. There has been physical and emotional abuse in this relationship. And what has been done by all parties involved, the community, the family, the national state. There are three, and of course the parties themselves involved. There have been 10 years of abuse in this relationship. So this is not the first time this victim has gone through this, and the perpetrator has continued to it. So there's been an enabling environment that has allowed him to continue this thing. So it's not as if it's something that happened out of nothing. The environment has enabled him to continue to do this activity.
And my colleague said in that report that the lady has been trying to maintain her home, trying to keep her marriage, trying to ensure that her home is not broken into two.
So the question you should ask yourself then is, why would a woman want to maintain her marriage? Because society puts value on marriage. Society puts value on you staying in your marriage. Most often than not, the only reason this issue has gone to the police is because it's come on media and somebody has filmed it. And even in their own reportage that your media house has done, how many times we saw the face of the perpetrator? Once. It was about a 5-minute documentary. We only saw the perpetrator's face only once. The victim's face was shown throughout the whole thing. So we always place emphasis on the victim, and we always sideline the perpetrators, and we always keep the perpetrators behind the scenes, which gives them coverage, which enables them to continue engaging in the activity. And the person who is victimized, the survivor of this crime, continues to be put out in public. If this woman survives this and this woman gets healed, the entire community knows. You mentioned where she lived, you mentioned her community, you mentioned her family, you showed her family members' house. So all these people are now being tagged as the victim's family. Her house is shown. The perpetrator's face was only shown in a very far distance. He can right now be with another woman, beating her up, for all you know. So we will continue to create an enabling environment where perpetrators are able to hide behind the scenes and continue this activity that they do. And it's both men and women. It's not just women who do this. Women also are perpetrators at times. But we continue to show the victim because it's elicits sympathy. When we all watch this thing, we all show sympathy, we show empathy, we are saddened But the suddenness, it gives you the media house also patronage. No offense. It gives you patronage. People will watch it. The newspapers will sell it. But then when you show the perpetrator's face, nobody wants to see it. It won't sell. And so that gives patronage.
But I think the intention here is to get the public to know the intensity or the gravity of the actions, the gravity of the abuse, in order for people to actually get to know that this thing is serious, because it looks like something that many people, especially the men, I'm a man, but especially the men, are not always looking at this thing with the seriousness that it deserves. And so this kind of incident happens in a home where there's this problem of victims or survivors not speaking out, trying to cover it up, trying to keep it under the bed, trying to solve it inside the room until it gets to a terrible situation like the one that we just watched now. As
Joana just rightly said, this woman is victim of the society in which she lives in. So she's a victim. I'm sure for 10 years she has been able to reach out to family members, to friends. But they will tell her that sometimes they'll say, okay, just try and take it easy, things like that. And she too, on her side, she puts value on her marriage, which is not even a marriage, because she's not even married to him. She doesn't have neither the birth certificate, the marriage certificate. No, they don't even have children. So it's totally abuse. But so my issue is that I'm seeing two levels. First, herself as a woman, we need to really start sensitizing these women, trying to let them understand the need of being their proper security. One cannot survive for 10 years in this situation. No, that's not possible. So we need to educate them to think out of the box, to know that marriage is not the end of the world. And also, we have had cases like this where the woman ended up dying because she was not listened to. She will be put the blame will be put on herself instead of the perpetrator. So I also think that it's because there is a conducive environment that we end up being in this type of situation. On a daily basis, especially on this media and other media, we watch cases like that. But I think that because some of the perpetrators are not properly punished, that is why we still have this type of cases. So I want to end by saying that it shows how difficult is the work that we are doing in terms of sensitizing the women for them to know that they don't only have duties, they also have rights. Women's rights are human rights. They should know it. And also sensitize the community, family level, community level, and national level on the need to take action. Because if we don't take action, we are going to still continue having this type of situations.
All right, let's go beyond the borders of the Republic of Cameroon to look at the situation from the African point of view, from the continental point of view. And there have been reports of increasing violation and abuse of the rights of women across the continent, especially in crisis-stricken countries, and Cameroon is just one of them. Recent figures of the United Nations indicate that just for the month of June 2021 alone, at least 40 cases were reported in the crisis-stricken regions of the northwest and southwest regions. How bad is the situation on the ground across the African continent?
I always say this, that what happens in conflict or during conflict period is just a manifestation of what is happening during times of peace. The only reason why the numbers may go up during times of conflict is that there's chaos and there is an absence of stability. So law and order has broken down, and because there is no policeman to police anyone in court, what was always happening behind closed doors now happens freely. So when conflict breaks out and the policeman is not around to now guide and protect all of us, what we're doing behind our closed doors becomes free for all. So if the numbers are going up, as you are saying, by the UN and the AU, it's just because it was already happening during times of peace. But because there is no one to safeguard the rights of the people, now people have freedom to do, or in quotes, they feel that they have the liberty to now misbehave in the cycles. As I said earlier on my very opening statement, I don't think the numbers are going down, and that is because, as Sylvia said, we're not fast tracking the prosecution, we are not punishing perpetrators, we are not making it difficult to commit atrocities. And I cited the example of the reportage that was given. The gentleman who is alleged, let me use the word alleged, to have committed this atrocity, we didn't even see his face very well. So for all you know, right now it's a different town committing the same crime to another person, but a female's face we could see. So it's easy to get away, in quotes, with these crimes. Even if we don't know how far the case has gone, even if the case ever goes to the police, there's society, going back to what Sylvia said about educating, sensitizing people about their rights. If these cases go to the police, most often than not, in many of our communities, the family will be going spoken to and ask the woman to take the case out of the police station and settle it at home, because it's a family issue. How dare you take your spouse to the police station? How dare you put your marital issues in the police station? So we make it comfortable for perpetrators to get away. And once people don't feel they are going to be punished, numbers will go up. It's like how when you're doing exams, you can easily cheat. Everybody will try and cheat. So when you don't make it easy, when you make it easy for people to get away with crime, they continue to commit the crime.
The crimes will continue.
Yes.
And sometimes it becomes quite difficult to lay hands on some of the perpetrators, and sometimes we can have just a single photograph of them. We'll trace them to the police, and the police will say, no, you can't get this guy, you can't show him on the air, you can, and then all of those obstacles will come up, and at the end of the day, only the victim or the survivor is seen here and there, and with all the consequences that it can bring forth. Now, what are the enabling factors in the war zones, in the conflict situations? What are the enabling factors? We know that in some cases women are used as tools of war by one party or the other. They are used for one reason or the other. Some of them become almost sex toys, so to speak, in quotes, to the belligerents and so on. What are the enabling factors in the war or conflict situations?
Yes, as we always say with the conflict tree, most of the time it's very important to try to understand what are the root causes. Most of the time we just see the consequences, the effect, but the root causes. When I look into the Cameroon context and in other African countries, I feel that there are certain elements which can fuel this type of situation. I want to say that when people have, for example, no access to basic needs, this is something that creates a kind of frustration. So I want to talk about poverty. Sometimes poverty can lead to type of things that we have just watched. Because people are living in horrible situations, they become so stressed and tense most of the time.
And more vulnerable.
More vulnerable, yes. Also, it's a lot of discrimination also going around. So we should address this type of things if you want to address this type of issues on the long run. And looking into the context of Cameroon and other countries I just mentioned, is also about the governance. Truly, it's about the governance. Like in Cameroon, for example, we are having a crisis in the north and the southwest, and this crisis is long, deep rooted in the history. There's kind of frustration from one side. So, and most of the time when people try to bring out their issues, the responses are not always appropriate. Like, you should give the opportunities to people to say what they feel. And when the response that people receive is violent, like military response, it can create the situation that we are going through. And also, I want to talk about illiteracy. The rate of illiteracy is also another issue, because when I look at the young boys and girls who are being recruited as suicide bombers and so on, I think it's because their level of education do not give them the tool to understand, to make an informed choices. They are easily
enticed by some of the fighters and so on. In the northwest region of the country, recently a woman was killed in a church, PCC Balinyama, and in that report which we aired at the beginning of this program, there are images of two young girls who were raped in Boya and impregnated by the same man. And women are among many of the IDPs, the internally displaced persons living in the littoral, in the west region, in other parts of the country, and suffering gender-based violence and abuse and violation of their rights are women.
That's what I also want to talk about, the issue of masculinities. You know that it's about power. It's about power. It's like the more you are powerful, the more you have weapons, the more you have a position, you feel that you're in a position to just do anything that you want. So the masculinity, and especially the militarized masculinities, making the weapons, making the power that you have so a tool to a kind of play around the others is also something that you must address. And Joana mentioned the roles, the gender roles. You know that we grew in a society where there is a place for women and a place for men. So the young girl, she grows, she knows that she feels inferior to the man. She doesn't have a say, and this is seen even in our textbook. So she grows in such a way that knowing that the man is the superior, she has to obey, she has to be submissive, which is not bad, but that does not mean that the man has the right on death or over her body. So because the situation is that because of this gender role, the men feel that they have the right to do just anything, and then the women don't feel that they have the right to say no to some of these things.
All right, Joana, when you look at the situation, the prevailing situation as far as the violation and abuse of the rights of women and young girls are concerned in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, what's your analysis as a right defender?
Well, I won't say I'm an expert in what is happening in the northwest and southwest of Cameroon. I would have preferred to leave those issues to Sylvia to answer. But when it comes to issues of violations of rights of women and children in general, what I would say is that it comes back to the host, the country, and the responsibility of the country to ensure that its citizens are protected and protected fully. And so as somebody who always advocates for ensuring that the rights of people are protected, it will fall back on the entities that are responsible in the country for providing safety and security to citizens, to ensure that not only their rights are respected and protected, but also the social amenities needed. So the question, for example, I go back to the video we watched at the beginning. As I was watching that report, the question I asked myself was, what are the social services available to this woman to access? What are the trauma services available to her? What are the psychosocial services available to her? What are the counseling services available to her? What are the medical services available to her? She said she was beaten beyond the physical abuse. Was there any sexual abuse to her? What are the services? And they're saying that she spent the whole night on a chair. For somebody whose ribs are broken, is that the best place for her to be? For somebody who has gone through that kind of trauma, what are the services in the country available to a survivor of GBV? And this is I think it was in Douala. Was it in Douala or Douala? So this is like one of the big towns. Yeah. So what are the services for this particular survivor in a big town? So the question I asked myself was, what are the the psychosocial services available to this particular survivor in this instance? Because she needs support beyond medical, the psychological. As I said, the whole community now knows her. The whole country now knows her. So if she moves to Yaoundé, she's known. So what are the services available to her? So it goes back to the same thing in the South, is it Southwest and Northwest. What are the services available to the victims? You mentioned a young woman who has been raped by 2 men and impregnated.
Two of them impregnated by the
same man. Definitely who will take care of the children. Or I'm sure the young girls also. So now there are 2 children who are going to give birth to 2 children. So there are 4 children now who needs to be taken care of. What are the social services available to them? Are they carrying any diseases? Has he infected them with any sexual diseases? Do we know or we do not know? What are I'm sure their parents or their families are also not going to provide services to these young girls. So what is the country, what services are they providing for them in these times? And that is the question I ask myself. What efforts are being made to keep this man arrested, prosecuted, and I hope you understand. So it falls back on the state entities to carry out their duties to the fullest, irrespective of who the offenders or the perpetrators are.
And those questions also apply to women and young girls who have been pushed out of their homes by violence in those 2 regions, and they are seeking refuge in other parts of the country, and they have become much more vulnerable. We have been told that many of them have become I don't know how to put it in a very polite way. They are sex workers. They have started selling their bodies to earn some money to be able to purchase a piece of bread, a loaf of bread, and so on. And they are living, many of them, in very precarious conditions.
So you asked Sylvie earlier on what are some of the enabling factors that lead to sexual and gender-based violence. She mentioned poverty. And she mentioned instability and insecurity, and you are mentioning yourself one of the enabling factors. So if the state, again, it goes back to my point about the state entities providing safe havens for persons who have been displaced. So people who have now been displaced from their communities by the conflict, and telling displaced persons, it beholds on the state entities to ensure that there is some kind of camps that are safe for them to find shelter. And those camps, unfortunately, most of these camps, if you don't set them up well, also become a haven for abuse, because then the people there then see them as vulnerable. It's like a camp for vulnerable persons where you can exploit them. They need food, they need water, so you sell food for them, they exchange food for sex. But then if there's the entities involved are able to set up very well, they are able to now provide the shelter, the food, the water in a way that ensures that they are safe and they are secure. It prevents these things from happening. But if you don't provide these entities and these safe havens, then you are pushing the victims to be double victimized.
In the far north region of the country, precisely in the locality of Mary, many of the women and the young girls there are complaining and sending distress calls to the own administration that they have been constantly being raped by ex-militants of the terrorist sect, Boko Haram.
Yes, I want to join Joana and say that it's about how the society responds to these cases, especially the officials that are set for them. I want to mention a case that we had during the training, a woman who indicated that there was a case, there was a lawyer, a case in court of a woman who was victim of gender-based violence, and the judge rather said, if I were the one, referring to the woman's husband, I would have done worse. So it's also caused about our responsibilities as those who are supposed to give support to these women. And talking about the case of these women going through rape, I also want to support what she said, because when they are victims of rape like that, where do they go to? Most of the time, where do they go? Sometimes they will go to the police, but they will be sometimes blocked by some of the expectations that they have to abide with at the level of the police. And there are no services also, as she mentioned, to welcome this type of cases. So at the end of the day, it's become very difficult. You will see these women, more cases coming up and no proper response. So that's the need to call on individual responsibility at different levels. We should try to do to play our own part, but we know that the main responsibility is at the level of the state, because it's about having these necessities, having these possibilities of addressing all this, whether psychosocial support, whether health issues that are linked to gender-based violence. But in the current situation of Cameroon, we all agree that this is lacking too much. I remember we were in the far north exactly, when we were conducting the gender conflict analysis, and we were able to see this woman who was almost living in the air. She was a victim of, she was abducted by the Boko Haram fighters and was able to run away. And she came to the communities. She was on a daily basis being considered as a Boko Haram by the same community. While she has tried to run away, no one will accept to rent her a house, and then she will change 4 houses in a week. And when she will try and be selling something in the market, she will be called Boko Haram, Boko Haram. And she tried to go to the authorities, and no response. So, as she said, there is a need for proper response.
From what you're saying now, it can be concluded that the involvement of governments or government authorities, even with the case of other African countries, we have Nigeria, where young girls have been repeatedly kidnapped by Boko Haram militants, and even in the situation in Chad, in the Central African Republic, and other countries, in Mali, and so on. It will appear government authorities are not adequately involved in this fight, from what both of you are saying.
Yes, they are doing. They are.
I don't think we said they're not adequately involved. What I said was, you asked me who is supposed to play a role, and I said the state entity will take the lead in providing, because they are the ones who have sovereignty over its citizens. But as to whether or not they are or not, I can't access it for Cameroon, because I'm not Cameroon.
From the case that we just heard at the beginning of this program, we can see that she's been more or less abandoned to herself and the family.
For all you know, it is there, but she doesn't know.
Sleeping on a chair for the whole night with all the pains and the suffering.
But the question you should ask yourself is there a services available? For all you know, the services are available, but it is not known to them. And that is where the question comes in. How much do we advertise to the survivors, the services that are available to them? Does she know her rights as a survivor? Does she know what her rights are as a survivor in seeking redress for her case? And that is where work like what Sylvia and her office and other agencies in Cameroon are trying to do, getting people who have survived these atrocities to understand what their rights are and to understand where they can go and seek redress. Because she may not know, her family may not know.
Many of them may not be aware of the programs and the measures put in
place. That's where you come in.
By the Ministry of Women's Empowerment and the Family, for example, and the social services at the level of the councils to help them in some of these situations. But when we look at the case of the IDPs, for example, they are just there, here in Douala, for example, many of them in Bonaberi, and they have been there for several months. We have been reporting that these people are living in precarious conditions, and they are still there. Sometimes they are offered mattresses, they are offered buckets, they are offered soap and some few biscuits and things like that.
No, that's why we are just, our work is also to advocate. We are advocating for the officials to really take action. Like now that we have this crisis, we have an increasing number of IDPs to give appropriate response by trying to have facilities for these type of people. And one of the things which is very important, the state cannot do everything alone. It's about coordinating the action. There are civil society organizations doing some work regarding that. It's the private sector. There are some religious and community leaders. So I think it's also about trying to coordinate these actions. There is action going on, but to be honest, the facilities are lacking. And the other stakeholders are having some possibility. So I think that one of the challenges is really to coordinate. As I was indicating yesterday during the training, we went to the Far North and we were able to see in the communities of IDPs, a community where many institutions came and were able to support the community children in having birth certificate. So when they will come, the children will register themselves, the family will register them, the other institution will come. But since they were not sure that they will have the birth certificate, so some registered like 4 times. At the end of the day, they ended up having 4 birth certificates. In the same community, we saw other people, IDPs, who have never been visited, even by a single institution. So that's why I'm saying that it's also about trying to see how to coordinate the actions. And I also think that the state should take the lead and make sure that it's properly coordinated.
Let's talk about the impact, the consequences of the abuse and violations of the rights of women and young girls, we understand that they are very far-reaching.
Well, I think if you look at if you start from the report that you shown this afternoon, or the impact on it, the whole community has watched it. There is, of course, the physical impact. We also saw the bruises on the woman. There is a psychological one. We saw the effect on even her son, who has now been traumatized by this. There is also the issue of the socio-economic impact. If this woman was working for the next couple of months, she's now not going to be able to work. So whatever means she was using to now raise funds or to support her livelihood and her son's livelihood has now come to a halt. For those who are sexually abused, as I said, for the 2 young girls who have now become pregnant, if they were in school, their education has now been truncated until they give birth. We don't know if the gentleman who impregnated them has carried any kind of diseases. So if he does, definitely we know he didn't use protection. So he may have transmitted these diseases to her, to the girls, and then also, if you're not lucky, to the babies that they are also carrying. So then we are now having generations of children who carry this disease for the rest of their life. So there's also the health implications of that. There is also the psychological one, the trauma. As I said, these videos will, if they don't request for it to be taken off the social media, off the internet, the video will always be online. So anytime anybody Googles their name, this video will come up, and it may follow her. So the trauma can always be relived if somebody ever says, "Oh, wasn't this you?" and shows it to her on their phone. So it continues to be there. There are those, for example, these young girls who are now being put into things like online pornography. And so they are being prostituted for online pornography as young children. They grow up, and then one day somebody says, "You look familiar." "I know I don't." "Yes, you do." And then they go online, and that's your face. And they are going to look for employment. That goes their future. So the psychosocial, the economic factors, the health implication. But also, there's one component that we haven't spoken a lot about, which is the enabling factor of religion and culture. And religion, as we see it, whether we like it or not, plays a huge role in enabling at times some of these abuses that we see. In the sense that most often than not, when all of us are going through any sort of abuse or uncertainties, we go to our religious, spiritual heads to seek counsel or to seek advice. And we've realized that, especially when it's women who are being abused, or even men who are being abused, they are told, "Oh, pray about it. Oh, God will make a way. Oh, the Lord will provide. Oh, let's trust God for it. Let's put it before God." And as they are praying about it, they are still being abused. And of course, then the quotations and scripture and Quran and stuff are quoted to back you and say, "Be submissive, love your spouse, God hates divorce," and all these other scriptures that are quoted to support staying in the abusive relationship. And look at your children, and before you realize it, the person is dead. God hates divorce, but God doesn't like you being killed.
In other words, while that is being done, action has to be taken.
Exactly.
Action has to be taken.
It has to always be done together. But of course, that is not said. It's like said, let's pray about it. The praying about it is one. Faith without works, it has to go hand in hand. You can't be telling me to pray about it while also taking me back to the same house we've beaten. How do I pray when this woman is being, in the state that she's in? How does she pray for? I hope you understand me. So we have to look at how culture, religion also at times enables these things. And also, and when the person now goes to the far end, the faith becomes shaken. And that's also one of the causes and impacts. The loss of trust in the faith that you gave to that person in the beginning.
Spiritually destabilized.
Yes. So the psychosocial, the emotional, the physical, and of course, the economic loss has also the impact on the community, also as a country as a whole.
Right. And from what we saw, there is a total dysfunctioning of the family. And I want to also indicate the important role that the family should play in this type of situation. I want to quote a case. I think it happened in DRC Congo. A woman who went and stood at the bridge. She carried her 3 children, one after the other, and threw in the water. And she also jumped into the water. And she left a letter in which she was saying that she has been having abuses. She has been battered by her husband for so many years. She kept going to her family, and no one has ever listened to her. They kept asking her that she should bear with it. So she was just fed up, and she killed herself. That happened like 2 or 3 years ago. So to talk about family responsibilities. And when she talked about this situation of trauma, with all the physical injuries that happen, therefore the consequence is direct. The woman was able to go out for a job. Is no longer able to do that, and there is a direct consequence on the family and also at the nation at the level, because she's not able to contribute as she used to be. It is a he or a she, so it all depends on who is suffering from this. So it's very important to know that it happens on an individual, but it's linked to the community and then to the national level, and we should be very aware of that.
And some of the survivors live with what is referred to as internal wounds. Internal wounds which go a long way to kind of change the attitude towards people.
That's the
some
worst
become
case
aggressive
scenario.
and things like that.
That's the worst case scenario. One of the things that we discovered when we conducted the gender conflict analysis is the level of trauma. It's the level of trauma. And I remember a case. I always like to quote cases. Still in the far north, a woman, a girl, the minute she will see a mango, she will collapse. A mango, simple mango, a fruit that we take, simply because the day she was kidnapped, she was going to sell mangoes. So there are thousands of cases who are highly traumatized, and that's why Joana was talking about psychosocial support. I feel if they ask me in terms of priority, what should be some of the priorities in addressing as regard of the consequences of the crisis in Cameroon, I would think about making facilities to address the trauma that the women, the men, the population are going through. It's not only about women. We also have young boys who are going to school in the Northwest, and they were forced to join the armed group. And because they refused, they became targets. And so they're also suffering so much of being out of the environment and not able to go to school as they used to be. So it's very important. For me, that's the worst case, because it's not seen, it's not physical. It's internal wound. And until we address that, until we heal that, there is proper healing, the consequences are going to be. You will see somebody one day starting being very aggressive, and you will not understand why. This is the situation. And you will see people behaving in a funny way. You will not understand why. So it's very important to know that this internal, the more the crisis is increasing, the more cases we have. And if we don't address, some people will not speak, but it is hidden, and we should address it with the proper facilities and train personnel to address the psychosocial component of the situation.
All right, coming up, Immaculate Fogwe takes us to the newsstands, and we're going to take a look at what the newspapers reported this week. We'll be right back in some few minutes.
The Sun reports weekend of blood and fire in the northwest region. Bali bleeds. Oku goes aflame. International Red Cross Canadian staff shot dead. Eden says murder in the church. Nursing mother killed and pastor survives gunshot in the arm. Guardian Post exclaims drama in Oku. Security forces and population take cover as over 80 separatist fighters invade the town. The Voice. Anglophone self-destruction in Oku. Elak Market. Mayor's house and cars burnt. Another edition of the Guardian Post advances the necessity for the government to re-engage talks with jailed separatist leaders as blood continues to spill in the northwest and southwest regions. As reported by Newswatch, Muhammadu Buhari, Nigerian president, commits to barring secessionists from using Nigeria as a staging ground. The commitment was made during a security meeting held in Abuja, Nigeria. The Voice Weekender. United Kingdom condemns fresh violence in the northwest region and calls for investigation. The Post. Preserving Anglo-Saxon education. Southwest chiefs warn against creation of UB Annex in Akonolinga. The Horizon. At the inauguration of the National Passport Center, Ferdinand Gonga says curing identification cards and birth certificates is next.
Thank you, Immaculate Fogwe, for the press review. Talking about the management of the impact of gender-based violence. How best can these impacts, these consequences be handled, be managed by the victims or the survivors and the people around them, and even stakeholders and government authorities, government institutions?
I think there is always the need to do more advocacy. There's always the need to do more training. There's always to do more sensitization. And I think, for example, one of the things that we did this week in terms of the training that we carried out in addressing, working with local actors to better understand what it means to respond and prevent GBV. We spoke a lot about coordination during the training. And we spoke about the need to coordinate as actors, local actors, and not work in silos. Because for a long time, I think earlier on, Sylvie has talked about the issue of government needs to coordinate, and government alone cannot do the work. There are many actors involved in this work. There are many actors. There are the religious actors, there are the humanitarians, there are the security agents, there are different actors who support a survivor. There are many people who come together to ensure that at the end of the day, she's stable, she's safe, she can return and be reintegrated back into normal life in a very safe and healthy manner. But all these actors need to come together and work together. The health facilities that will care to her physical wounds, the medical facilities again who will care to her mental health, the psychologists who will deal with her counseling, the security agencies who will try and accost her perpetrator, the judicial service who will then take the case through the judicial service and get justice for her own internal family who give her the safety and the haven for her to heal, the church if she's a religious person who will give her some kind of solace and faith and hope, and then of course if she has to go back to work, the work environment that will give her the time off to heal. So there are many actors who need to come together to ensure that this one person will be given the space, but also the needed tools to regroup and heal from this process. But these people cannot work and try and say, okay, if it wasn't for us, she wouldn't come back to normal life. They need to understand that they all play a different role to getting her back to normal.
The actions should be coordinated.
And there's a lot of, that is what we've realized lacks a lot of the time, the lack of coordination between the various actors. So I think the past 1 week, in the training that we did here, we kept talking about coordination and coordination. The actors need to network and coordinate. But most importantly, one of the biggest actors that do not coordinate very well with everybody is the media. The media, unfortunately, for make news sells and selling news in a very tantalizing and a very flashy way, and having the most, for lack of a better word, the most glorified pictures on your newspaper articles or on your TV screens sells. So they want to bring out the news first. It has the most views, whether it's on social media or whether it's on. So having the media, or you how to use the media in a way that tells the story, but also gives dignity to the survivor.
Protects the dignity of the survivors. Now, what about the survivors themselves? What is expected of them? There is an issue about many of them not speaking out.
Yes, as she indicated, it's all about education and sensitization. We should keep on encouraging, sensitizing the survivors to really speak out, because speaking out is already the beginning of the healing. So it's very important to speak out and to reach out to someone close to you that you trust and be able to speak out. It's very important, because when they don't speak out, they are dying inside, as they say, and which is not okay. She mentioned something that I want to also stress is about the communication. It's also very important to be very careful about the communication around the cases, because sometimes it diminishes. I'm not only talking about the media, even in the families. The way sometimes the cases are portrayed is so frustrating also for those victims. So it's very important that we are mindful of our communication. Many cases that are on social media, for example, are already very difficult to handle because it's already on social media, and it's very difficult to handle some of the things. So the victim, the survivor, should really try and speak out and make sure that she talk to somebody close. And also, it's also about the security. I know that this has to do with security. So in case there is a security problem, the only thing is to be able to trust because it's not possible to live like the other lady that we watched just at the beginning of the program, living 10 years. They should know that maybe it's on them, but the fact that they are victims and suffering like this, they are also putting their or transferring their sufferings on their family and the community as a whole. So they should not feel uncomfortable speaking out, because that's the situation, that's what they have in their mind. That speaking out means that I'm a bad woman, I'm a bad person. No, it's about knowing that they don't only have duties, it's also that they are also human beings, and they also count for their family members. They have a role to play in the community, and they also have to play at national level.
I believe both of you are not asking the women to jump out of their homes immediately they have the least problem, but I think it should be clear that they need to take the appropriate actions, the appropriate actions to put an end to this kind of violations, because that case lasted for 10 years. Maybe just we can see the grace of God, she's still alive. In another situation, the person will not be alive today, but appropriate action should be taken. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure if your statement about jumping out of their home. I can't tell anyone to leave their home or to leave their marriage, but I will say that if you are being physically abused in your home, seek help. Seek appropriate help. Or if you are going through any form of abuse, and a lot of time people feel that because if it's not physical, it's not abuse. If it's not hitting me, then it's not abuse. But as you mentioned, you said what in internal pain, and you use the term internal pain, internal wounds. Yes. So the internal abuse, which you can't show for anybody to see, is actually more damaging at times than the physical one, because everybody can see when the slap happens or when the cut happens. But when you are being demeaned, when you are being isolated, when you are being insulted, when you are being degraded on an hourly basis, those cause internal wounds. Those ones you can't show it out. A person can put on all the makeup and wear the most fancy clothes, but internally the person is
dying.
Yes.
All right, we're going to take some interviews now. When we come back, you will tell us what your institutions have been doing so far to tackle this problem.
Since this crisis started, we've been cut off from the rest of the country because we don't hear news, we don't do anything because there is no light. Now, and is this light which generates the only source of water we have, which is the lake. We believe if a solar system is planted here, this will help us generate water, generate electricity. We are cut off from the entire world because of light. We don't hear news.
We moved from Bamenda through the West Province, the West region, and then we came through Bongso, we came through Ntaba and Sop, we went to Tumbo, we went to Ndu, and we went to Nkambe, we went to Misaje, and we passed through Ngarum and so on, and we visited all our guys on the road.
We are going to focus on the security challenges affecting both nations. Apart from the Boko Haram terrorist sets operating in the northern parts of Cameroon, the country is equally confronted with a terrorist movement in the northwest and southwest regions. So it is important that we put our heads together and come up with a strategy that can eradicate both groups.
Les éradiquer complètement.
His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari reassures you that Nigeria's territory will never be used as a haven or staging area by any group of secessionists to destabilize another friendly sovereign country. In addition, we will work closely together to ensure that any real or perceived challenge or attempt to form any alliances between secessionist groups in Nigeria and Cameroon are decisively dealt with. Furthermore, we will continue to support the efforts of the Cameroonian authorities by engaging all aggrieved parties to de-escalate security concerns in the northwest and southwest regions of the country.
From the monitoring of the response of cases with the tool that my colleagues call the GBV, the Gender-Based Violence Management Information System, we've got that more than 4,000 cases were reported only for the month of June in the northwest and southwest, the two regions. We need to work or to move ahead in a coordinated manner. We also need to keep the issue on the agenda. We also need people to better communicate on these issues. We need survivors to know that they are heard. So what we also need is to make sure that all the stakeholders take it as serious as it is, because it's a serious issue in the crisis area.
I want to articulate on the media, which of course is actually one of the major actors that can help to actually stamp the actions on the ground by creating some visibility and raising the consciousness of community members and policy actors when it comes to fighting against gender-based violence, and also taking note of the human rights violations on the ground.
What I'm taking as a journalist back to my region is to educate the population and bring the stakeholders, to understand the importance of not perpetrating violence against, women, particularly in this period of crisis, and so that the stakeholders and even government officials understand that there is a need for some punishment, to be implemented on people who perpetrate violence against, women.
The petition that we signed on the 19th of August 2021 was a way of provoking the convocation of the elective General Assembly, because you remind that our bar president passed sometime around October 2020, just a few months before the expiry of his mandate, and since then there is an interim at the bar, and we are crossing a period of vacancy where the laws organizing practice at the bar and our internal rules and regulations are not being observed. So the more reason that we thought it wise that it was high time that we lawyers will first of all respect our law before going to the courts to plead that the law should be respected. So the President of the General Assembly was supposed to convene this General Assembly sometime around May, according to our internal rules and regulations, but he failed to do so for reasons best known to him. And we are seeing that November is coming, and for fear of that we continue to pursue in this illegality, we decided to raise or provoked this convocation of the elective General Assembly. So it is done in the interest of the bar, and it is done with respect to the provisions that organize practice at the bar and our internal rules and regulations.
The interviews of the week, I begin with you, Joana Osei Tutu. You are head of the Women, Peace and Security Institute of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. What have you been doing at the level of that institution to put an end to these ills in our society?
I mean, this week, for example, we've been in Douala organizing a one-week training course on building local capacity to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. And as I said earlier on, the course works with local actors who work in the area of gender-based violence. We have a dialogue on what is being done in Cameroon, what can be done more, and ways in which we can enhance what is being done. But also, most importantly, coordinating with the various actors on how best they can network among themselves in the acts and the work that they do in the prevention of gender-based violence. So we bring together as much as possible actors from all the spheres: security, religion, traditional, media, civil society, youth groups. What am I missing? So all the broad spectrums of actors and who work within the space of gender-based violence to dialogue, to converse, but also to give the tools and the knowledge that is needed to understand what it means, what are the causes, what are the impacts, what are the power dynamics, and how that relates and that translates to the abuse. But more importantly, how do you now take this to design strategies and advocacies to move forward in the way that they do?
Right.
Yes,
with Women's International League for Peace and Freedom.
Yes, I know that time is running out. I'll quickly talk about 3 quick things that we are doing. The first is a women's situation room with a call center. You have a call center with the number 8243. People are able to call on that number and report cases they are going through or they know in their communities. And we in turn also take the call to the cases to either to the authority or the competent people can be in charge. We have also set up a legal and judicial assistant clinic. And the role is to support cases like this of gender-based violence in terms of advice, counseling, and also in terms of support in court if the case needs to be taken to court. So we have this legal clinic which is new and which is really supporting women and men suffering from this type of violence. The last I can mention is we have formed, trained a pool of youth influencers for peace, web influencers. So on regular basis, they use the social media to make campaign against gender-based violence. They call their peers, they call the community on the dangers. They inform them, they raise awareness on the dangers of gender-based violence and all the other evils in the society, including hate speech. And they call the communities to take action against this type of situation. So that's, in brief, some of the things that we are doing in Wave Cameroon. All right, the number is 8243. If you're being abused or your rights are being violated, you can channel your problem there, and of course you're going to have solutions coming. All right, Joana, Amar, Osei, Tutu, Sylvie, Jacqueline, Ndongmo, thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for this edition of The Insight. Goodbye.